They told me the storms up here wouldn't last. Mountain weather, violent, quick, and then gone. But this one stayed, pinned itself to the valley like it had nowhere else to be. Thunder so loud it shook the windows of the old house. Rain thick enough to erase the barn from view. Dusty lay curled beneath the stove, his ears twitching at every rumble. He hadn't moved in hours. That was when the landline rang. Nobody calls the landline anymore. It's just a relic I keep plugged in out of habit, same as the framed photo of Ma on the mantel, or the rusted wind vane that spins even when the air is still. I picked it up. Static. Then a voice, low and clipped. "Mr. Miller, this is Lieutenant Colonel Dana Morris, U.S. Air Force. We have a situation." The words didn't surprise me. Not really. Something about the night already felt wrong, like the kind of night when memory won't let you sleep. I just listened. "There's a commercial flight en route from Portland to Denver. One engine's gone. They lost altitude in the storm. All major airports are shut." I closed my eyes. Then came the ask. "The pilot believes he can land at your strip." My strip. I hadn't flown out of that narrow grass runway in almost 6 years. It was soft now, rutted in places. No tower, no lights. Just a memory of flight where weeds grew through the cracks. "That strip was never meant for that," I said. Morris didn't argue. "He knows. He's asking anyway." "What's the pilot's name?" Pause. Then, "Captain Eli Hart. He said you taught him to fly." I didn't say anything for a long moment. Outside, lightning cracked like gunfire across the ridge. "You'll need time to light the field," Morris said. I looked toward the barn, toward the dark, toward all I'd let grow over. "I'll do what I can." The barn door groaned when I forced it open. Years of dust rose up like breath. Everything was still where I left it. Old feed sacks in the corner, busted tools along the back wall. And in the far stall, under a tarp that hadn't been moved in half a decade, the crate of solar runway lights. I dragged them out one by one. My back ached with each lift, but the pain kept me honest. Rain fell hard against the tin roof, a steady drumming that pushed me forward. Out on the strip, the mud grabbed at my boots. The grass was slick, bowed flat under the weight of water. The wind ripped across the valley with a sound like screaming trees. I didn't let myself think, just move. Set the lights in place, one every 20 yards down the edge of the strip. I pressed each stake deep into the soft earth, wiped the solar panels clean with my sleeve. Then I turned the headlights of the truck toward the east end, where the hill curved sharp and the drop-off began. Anything to help him see. I'd taught Eli to fly when he was barely 20, fresh out of community college, head full of charts and theory. He was quiet, but steady. Always asked the right questions. Always listened close. He flew like someone who'd been up there before he was born. The radio crackled in the cab of the truck. I climbed in and keyed the mic. "Miller strip to inbound aircraft. You still with me?" Static. Then, "Copy that, Mr. Miller. It's Eli. I see your lights." His voice was calm. Too calm. "You're running one engine. Left side's gone. Fire's contained. I've got control. What's your airspeed?" 240. Dropping. "Eli, you come in any faster than 180, you won't make it down." "I know." "You sure about this?" Silence. Then, "I trust you, sir." I stared through the windshield. Nothing but black sky and rain. "Then bring her in." I stepped out again. The rain hadn't let up. My coat was soaked through, my fingers numb. Dusty had followed me to the edge of the field, his coat slicked and his eyes glowing under the truck's beam. We waited. The thunder built again, louder now. Not thunder, though. Not this time. It was the sound of engines. One low, one coughing through resistance. A shape broke from the clouds, too low, too fast. I saw the nose dip, saw the wingtips tilt as he fought the gusts. Then the belly of the jet, gleaming white and silver, streaked with black where the fire had scorched its side. He was coming in hot. The 737's wheels hit with a scream. The landing gear bounced once, then caught. Mud and water exploded behind it. The jet shuddered, nose tilted up, brakes locked. I held my breath. The plane ate up the strip, tore through the puddles, past the third light, the fourth, and stopped. Just stopped. Less than 100 feet from the end. Steam rose from the wheels. One engine still sputtered, then went silent. The only sound left was the hiss of rain on metal. I didn't move for a while. Then I saw the cabin door open. A figure climbed out, stumbling slightly on the air stairs. Tall, lean, soaked through. He didn't wave, didn't shout. He just walked. We met halfway down the strip. Eli took off his flight cap. His face was pale, eyes raw. He looked older than he should have, but the moment he saw me, his mouth pressed tight and he nodded. "I knew you'd answer," he said. I nodded back, didn't trust myself to speak. Behind him, the passengers were starting to disembark. Some cried, some hugged each other like survivors. A few knelt in the wet grass, kissed the ground. No one screamed, no one panicked. They were alive because of a strip that wasn't meant for them, because of a call that reached the one person who wouldn't say no. The emergency crews arrived 40 minutes later, lights flashing, radios barking. They tried to take control, but the work was already done. The field held the mark of landing gear now. The tracks would stay there, carved into the mud like memory. I watched them go, watched Eli walk with the others toward the waiting vehicles. But before he climbed in, he turned back once more. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." He said it like it wasn't just about the landing, like it went deeper than that. I turned toward the barn, toward Dusty, toward home. 3 days passed before anyone came back. I spent the time walking the strip, checking for damage. The soft patches where the wheels dug in would need grading. The grass was shredded in places, rutted and torn. I worked with a spade and a rake. My shoulders ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that reminded me I still had something to fix. Dusty followed me everywhere, mud dried into the white of his coat. At night, I sat on the porch and listened to the quiet return to the valley. No engines, no sirens, just the wind brushing the tops of the cottonwoods and the distant hum of crickets reclaiming the dark. On the third morning, I was hauling a roll of tarp out to cover a gouged patch when a convoy appeared on the road. 3 black SUVs, government plates. They turned up the drive like they'd been there before. Dusty barked once and trotted to the gate. I wiped my hands and followed. The lead vehicle stopped a few feet from the porch. A woman stepped out, slim, composed, uniform pressed sharp as glass, general's insignia on her collar. I didn't need to be told. "Mr. Miller?" she asked. I nodded. "General Elaine Foster," she said. "I'd like to speak with you." I waved her toward the porch. We sat on opposite ends of the bench, the silence between us not uncomfortable, just honest. "I reviewed the report," she said. "The landing, the condition of the field. Frankly, it shouldn't have worked." "It was close," I said. "You saved a lot of lives." I didn't answer, just looked out across the strip. She reached into her satchel, pulled out a folder. "We want to lease your property." I turned. She opened the folder and laid it on her lap. Pages of schematics, cost breakdowns, projected use, a full proposal. "The government is prepared to upgrade the surface, reinforce the runway, and maintain it as an emergency diversion facility. Remote, low visibility, rough weather. This place is ideal. We'll install lights, weather systems, make it regulation compliant." "And what do I do?" "You keep the land. We lease the right to use the strip under emergency protocols. You remain caretaker. You'll have an annual stipend, hazard pay, and full repair coverage." I looked at her hard. "What's the catch?" "No catch," she said. "The only reason we even found you was because Captain Hart insisted. Said he wouldn't report for duty until this was made right." I looked down at my hands. "They tried to foreclose last month," I said. "Didn't even know I was still on the ledger." "Not anymore," she said. We sat in silence for a while. Then I stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and looked out. The strip was scarred, but whole. "All right," I said. She stood too. "There's a formal signing scheduled for next week. Press will want to speak with you. We can keep it minimal." "I don't talk much." "That's all right," she said. "You've already said what needed saying." She handed me the folder. I didn't open it. As she stepped off the porch, she paused once. "Captain Hart wanted to be here, but he's being debriefed. He left something for you." She motioned to a young officer who stepped forward and handed me a sealed envelope. When I opened it later, I found a short note, written in blocky, all-cap handwriting. "You gave me a compass when I was lost. I carried that lesson every flight since. What you did that night wasn't just skill, it was fate. You once told me that flying was 10% mechanics and 90% belief. Thank you for believing in me, then and now." Below it, a small pin, "His wings." I didn't cry, just sat with it for a while. The next week, they came back, not with silence, but with respect. Neighbors arrived first, some of whom I hadn't seen in years. Then the veterans, some of them in jackets too tight or too loose, some with canes, a few in wheelchairs. They lined the edge of the strip, caps in hand. Then came Eli. He walked up, that same calm stride, and stood beside me. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. The general gave a short speech, measured, Precise. She read out the new name, announced the federal designation. Miller Emergency Airfield. The crowd clapped. Quiet but steady. Dusty sat beside me, tail still, watching. Someone handed me a plaque. I didn't look at it. I already knew what it said. Afterward, people milled around. Coffee, handshakes, a few photos. I stayed near the strip, watched the light catch the new markers they'd driven into the soil. Steel stakes where the solar lights had been. Permanent now. The valley was still. The storm had left. The land had healed. But the mark of that night would never fade. Not in the mud. Not in me. The reporters came later. Not many. A few local channels. A couple from Denver. One from Oregon who knew Eli's background and wanted the angle of the young pilot and the forgotten mentor. I gave them what I could. Simple answers. Clear facts. I didn't want a story made out of me. I didn't want a myth. I told them what happened, not what it meant. They asked why I'd kept the strip all these years. Why I hadn't sold. Why I hadn't let it go like everyone else. Because some things don't belong to the bank. Because memory holds land in ways paper never can. After they left, the airfield was quiet again. That's when the real visitors came. One man at first, then two, then a few more. Veterans, mostly. Some pilots, some not. All with stories of how they'd landed in worse places. All with hands like mine, scarred, worn, searching for something solid. They didn't come to praise me. They came to say they understood that a place like this still mattered. One man, Frank, he said his name was, had served with my brother in Korea. He hadn't seen the strip since '64. Said it looked smaller now, but no less important. We sat on the fence for a while, talked about nothing. It was the kind of silence that says everything. The government team began work the next week. Survey crews, contractors, engineers with clipboards. They came early, left late. I stayed out of their way, but kept watch. The soil was tricky in some places. Drainage had to be adjusted. They carved out a proper taxiway, laid gravel, smoothed the approach, poured a concrete pad where my fuel tank used to sit. Every day they worked, I stood at the edge and watched. They offered me a trailer with air conditioning and a desk. I said no thanks. My porch had everything I needed. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the ridge, I watched a young crew chief kneel beside the west end. He set a new light into the socket, bolted it down, stepped back. Then he looked up at me. "You think it'll hold?" he asked. "It held before," I said. He nodded like that was enough. By the end of the month, it looked like a real field. Still narrow, still surrounded by pasture and trees. But the lines were fresh. The lights were flush. The windsock had been replaced with one that actually caught wind. Then they gave me the badge. A small card, blue stripe, laminate, said, Miller, Raymond, civilian caretaker, EMR, 127. I held it for a long time. Not because it mattered, but because it didn't. I wasn't doing this for a title. I was doing it because someone needed to be there. Because years ago, I'd told a young man in a rusted hangar, always know where you'd land if the world went wrong. He'd remember, even when I forgot. The first test flight came on a Thursday. C-130 touch and go. Smooth, loud, left a smell in the air I hadn't breathed in years. Warm oil, scorched rubber, the scent of power landing where once there was nothing. Eli came again a week later. He brought his wife this time, introduced her quiet, said she'd heard the story and didn't believe half of it until she saw the strip. She gave me a hug without asking, the kind that holds something unspoken. I told him, she said, you were the one who gave him that stillness he flies with. That it started here. I nodded, didn't know what to say. Eli looked at the sky, then at the strip. We ever talk about how close that was? He asked. No. He nodded again. Good. Let's keep it that way. Before they left, he walked back once more. You saved 147 people that night, he said. I looked toward the mountains. No, I said. I just kept a promise. The weeks passed. The strip became part of the system. Quietly added to maps. Filed into emergency protocols. No fanfare. No ceremony beyond the one we already had. The land held steady. And every so often, when the wind shifted just right, I could hear the ghost of engines. Faint, familiar, like memory, flying low across the ridge. It was Dusty who found the boy. Late August. The morning still held coolness, but the afternoons were full of dust and heat. I was mending a fence post near the eastern line when Dusty started barking. Not his usual bark. This was sharp, insistent, the kind that carried urgency. I followed him into the tree line. Found the boy crouched beneath the shade of a bent pine, knees drawn to his chest, face half hidden under a too large hoodie. He didn't run, just looked up, thin, eyes wide, no older than 17. Dusty padded over and sat beside him like they already knew each other. "You alright?" I asked. He nodded, then shook his head, said nothing. I didn't push. "Come on," I said after a minute. "Let's get you some water." He followed, slow steps, silent. I didn't ask his name, not right away. Sometimes people need silence more than answers. He sat on the back steps and drank the glass I gave him, held it with both hands like he was afraid it'd spill. I went about my business, checked the tools, moved the hoses, let him watch. After a while, he said, "I didn't know where else to go. You know someone around here?" "No." I looked at him, pale under the dirt, bruise just starting to yellow on his cheek. "You running from something?" He looked down, nodded. I didn't press. That night, I set up the cot in the shed, gave him a blanket and a lamp. Next morning, he was still there, had swept the floor, folded the blanket, stood like he didn't know what to do with himself. "You ever worked a shovel?" I asked. He nodded. "At my uncle's, before he kicked me out." "Then come on, let's dig a drainage trench." He worked steady, quiet, careful with the blade, like someone who knew what it meant to be corrected for mistakes. Over the next days, he stayed, never asked for anything, took up chores before I even said them, fed Dusty, oiled the gate hinge, sat on the porch at dusk like it was the only place left on earth. He said his name was Tyler, that his mother had passed last winter, that his father wasn't someone worth going back to. I didn't need more. We didn't speak much, but that was fine. Some people are better understood through what they do, not what they say. One evening, he asked about the runway. I told him the story, just the facts. He listened without blinking. "You really lit it up?" he asked. I did. "For a passenger plane? For a promise?" He nodded like he understood. "You ever fly?" I asked. He shook his head. I stood, walked to the barn, came back with a chart. "You want to learn?" His face lit in a way I hadn't seen before. I started teaching him like I taught Eli. Ground school first. How to read the sky. How to trust instruments. How to respect wind. We didn't have a plane. Not yet. But that wasn't the point. Teaching was the point. Passing something forward. Making sure the runway had more than one reason to stay open. Weeks passed. Tyler settled into the rhythm of the farm. He called Dusty his co-pilot. He asked questions about the stars. He fixed the old weather vane and painted the gate without asking. I wrote a letter to General Foster, told her about the boy, asked if there was room in any of the programs for someone with no background, no records, but the right kind of heart. She replied with a short note, "We don't train resumes. We train people. Send him when he's ready." Tyler cried when I gave it to him. Not loudly, just a quiet wetness around the eyes, the kind you pretend isn't there. He didn't have much when he left. Just a bag, a chart, and a new pair of boots we found at the co-op. The day he rode out with the recruitment team, I stood at the edge of the runway. He looked back once, raised his hand. I raised mine too. Dusty whined, then settled beside me. The truck disappeared down the road. The valley was quiet again, but something had changed. The runway was no longer just a place where someone landed in desperation. It was a beginning. Winter came early that year. The valley went white before Thanksgiving. The trees lost their shape under the snow, and the airfield looked like a sheet of glass laid flat across the earth. The lights still blinked along the strip, steady against the dark. I spent the season in slow motion. Mornings by the stove, evenings with Dusty curled at my feet. I listened to the wind more than I used to. Heard it moving through the bare branches like a voice trying to remember a tune. The mailman brought a letter in late December, sealed with an emblem I didn't recognize. It was from Tyler, written by hand. Careful block script. No errors. He was at basic. Said he'd been selected for air training. Said he used what I taught him to pass his NAV test. Said it felt like home when he looked at a compass now. At the bottom, he'd written something I hadn't expected. "I don't know what people are supposed to call each other when they aren't blood, but I hope it's alright if I say thank you for being mine." I didn't reply right away, just folded the letter and set it under the brass paperweight shaped like a propeller. One of the few things I'd kept from my flying days. Outside, snow kept falling. Quiet, gentle, a kind of hush that made the whole world seem reverent. The airstrip was used 3 more times that winter. Once for a life flight chopper that couldn't make it to the hospital. Once for a military drone reroute. Once for a lost Cessna that couldn't find its radio beacon. Each time, I was here. Each time, the lights worked. The line held. In March, The plaque arrived. Official. Heavy. Set in stone. They sent a team to install it near the western edge. Miller Emergency Airfield. Designated EMR 127. For service rendered under fire. And for the quiet that followed. I didn't tell anyone they got the last line right. Spring thawed the valley. The mud came back. Then the grass. The strip greened again, like a wound healing slow but sure. I walked it each morning. Watched the birds return, set out new seed where the frost had bitten too deep. One morning, just past first light, a truck came up the road. I didn't recognize it. It stopped at the gate. A man stepped out, mid-30s, haircut sharp. Air Force issue. You Mr. Miller? He asked. That's what they tell me. I'm Staff Sergeant Royce. Captain Hart sent me. I nodded once. Waited. He said to bring you this. He reached into the cab and lifted out a box. Long, slim, wooden. I took it from him. Felt the weight of something that mattered. Back on the porch, I opened it slow. It was a plaque. Brass on walnut. Raymond Miller. Instructor. Caretaker, builder of runways others land on, with honor, from those who never forgot. I didn't say anything, just ran my fingers along the grain. Royce stood silent. Captain Hart also said, he added, if you ever want to teach again, they'll make room. I looked out across the field. The light wind bent the grass just enough to see the lines. I've already taught, I said. They're still flying. Royce nodded. Then I'll tell him the field's in good hands. He left after that. Dusty followed me to the barn. We didn't do much that day. Just sat. Let the hours pass quiet. That evening, I pulled out the old journal. The one I used to keep flight logs in. I hadn't written in it for years. I flipped to a new page. Dated it. Then I wrote, March 12, light wind, temp 57, strip clear. One visitor. One reminder. Still holding. And below that, the old phrase I used to write at the bottom of each flight log, back when I was young and the world still felt wide. Wheels down, heart full. The next day brought nothing special. No planes, no letters. But sometimes that's the point. The runway is ready. The lights are set. The field is silent. And I'm still here. Not waiting, just steady. Because every life, if you listen long enough, circles back. And when it does, it needs somewhere to land. Late summer. The grass along the edges of the strip had turned the color of gold coins, dry and rustling. The air smelled of pine resin and sun-warmed earth. Evenings came earlier now, and the shadows stretched long across the valley. I stood with Dusty at the west end of the runway. They'd asked me once how I felt about it all, what it meant to save 147 people. I didn't have an answer then. I do now. It wasn't about the landing. Not really. It was about all the moments that came after. The calls, the letters, the boy in the shed who became a pilot, the old friends who returned to walk the fence line, the field that stayed open, not just for metal and engines, but for memory. Eli came again that month, alone this time. He didn't say much, just walked the strip with me, slow. At the end, he turned to me. You really believe in promises that long? I looked at him, at the sky, at the place where the clouds broke open above the ridge. Sometimes you just keep a promise long enough, I said, and one day, it saves more than just yourself. He nodded. We didn't shake hands, didn't hug, just stood there. Dusty barked once at a hawk circling overhead, then settled. As the sun slipped behind the far hill, the runway shimmered, gold and silent. I turned toward home, toward the porch, toward the waiting quiet, and behind me, the strip stood ready, always ready.